Okay, chapter 18, Rise of Industrial Society, starts out with an essential question, which was industrialization, increased standard of living, and the opportunities of most Americans, but at what cost? We're going to be looking at a lot of the different changes, and some of them for the better, some of them not so much in society at this point. All right, causes of rapid industrialization. I think there were 9 total that we're going to be going through. At this point, steam revolution, 1830s to 1850s, is going to start out fueling the U.S. economy, especially with the railroad. It employed thousands of people, fueled by the new waves of immigrants. We're talking a lot about those in Chapter 19. Abundance of cheap and natural resources, coal, iron ore, lumber, glass. Railroad was the first big business in the U.S. to stretch over new land, and it was the key to opening up the West. Early on, the lines were disconnected. They used different gauges of railroads. The railroad, what am I trying to think of? The railroad lines, the different widths. And so that meant that you couldn't go from one line to another, and so they were different, so they couldn't connect them as well until they standardized them later on. Trunk line was a major route between cities. One of the terms you were supposed to know. All of this was a magnet for foreign investment. We'll be getting to that one too. Question, answer. All right, more causes. Railroad industry is going to end up building up other industries like technology. With the Bessemer process, it was a technological breakthrough leading to the rise of heavy industry. Henry Bessemer converted pig iron into raw steel, discovering that blasting air into the molten iron equaled a high quality of steel. It was very cheap, required no hands-on labor, and so all of that helps quite a bit. It's going to fuel the other ones as well. Just another side note, railroad companies devised time zones and standard time in 1883 so that they could keep things on schedule. During the Civil War, Congress decided to build a transcontinental railroad using Union Pacific and Central Pacific, and was a race to the finish met at Promontory Point, Utah. All right, refrigerated rail cars were another big idea. Taking dressed meat using ice, invented by Gustavus Swift. Originally, some of the ideas came from Tesla as well, to keep the meat fresh, and so the cattle would also not lose weight. If you were transporting cattle, to give them something cool to ride in, not just the hot box cars that they would end up losing weight and end up dying most likely before they'd ever get there. Another side note I forgot to say on the Bessemer process was steel. Andrew Carnegie from Scotland gained a lot of money from the war, opened his own steel mill, used the Bessemer process, worked his way up from being a poor Scottish immigrant to superintendent of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and then later on manufacturing steel and bypasses competition, becomes one of the wealthiest men. Edison, a lot of inventions, I'll be showing you some pictures of them. One of his well-known things was known as the Wizard of Menlo Park. Menlo is now Edison, New Jersey. It's the first industrial research lab. Most likely one of the more successful ideas of his, because people got together and bounced ideas off of each other with research and became more successful than they could each in their own individual labs. Transportation, planes, automobiles, all of this making advances towards modern society. Edison. Question on Edison. Answer. A light bulb was one of his inventions, first one, 40 hours. Phonograph recorded on tin foil. Later on, some of them had wax cylinders like in the picture. The dictaphone would record voice, record your speech. Bell used wax on his. Also the motion picture camera. Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone. Bell Telephone Company spoke communication. Used electrified metal discs. First one installed in the White House, 1878. By 1895, there were over 300,000 phones, and by 1905, 10 million. George Westinghouse had alternate current. Also invented the air brake, helped the railroad. Westinghouse Electric Company used alternating high currents over long distances to let electricity go farther. Airplane, Wright brothers. The Model T, Henry Ford, will be talking a lot more about him in coming units. Lowered the cost, became more cost effective. So people would buy more, sell more product at a lower cost, still make a greater profit because you still sell quite a bit more than you would have keeping it more expensive. More patents, more inventions. All right, last couple causes of industrialization. Abundance of unskilled and semi-skilled laborers. A lot of people coming in, men, women, children, arrival of hundreds of thousands of immigrants pour in. They take the low-paying jobs. They're not very picky. You have a new talented group of businessmen, entrepreneurs, and advisors. A lot of money spent in advertising, a lot more money. They realize that this is a great way to advertise, a great way to manage their business. And 1867, $15 million was spent in advertising. By 1900, over $500 million, so a lot more spent in advertising and business. Market was growing with increased population. More demand meant they could sustain the bigger markets. New stores, catalogs, newspaper ads, chain stores like Macy's and Sears were starting up. Government was willing to help, especially with the railroads. Congress gave a lot of land to the railroads to spend. Federal government provided 65 million acres. Local government also gave money. So also the state governments, especially mostly to the railroads. Natural resources, oil, petroleum, iron ore, lumber, coal, copper, lead, all of that abundance in those natural resources meant the availability of all these new industries made it all possible. All right, laissez-faire economics, new business culture is the ideology of the industrial age. The idea that government regulation of business was kind of foreign to them at this point. Adam Smith, 1776, The Invisible Hand of Supply and Demand. The idea of laissez-faire, kind of hands-off government, let the market do what it's going to do, and don't try to alter it with government interference and management. Individuals should compete freely in the marketplace. There's no room for government. Even with the monopolies and trusts, they try to ward off government regulations until the monopolies and trusts get so big that they begin to need some legislation to change that. All right, books that were written about this time period, part of it, Horatio Alger wrote several novels on the American dream or that Protestant work ethic. People thought that with hard work, a little bit of luck, honesty, that people could come from modest means and become rich. It really was very, very rare to go from rags to riches. Typically, a wealthy man was a white Protestant from upper middle class with father in making or law. Hard work and success would show God's favor, kind of going back to those Puritan ideas. It was very rare. One of the success cases was Andrew Carnegie, but again, it was not a common occurrence. Herbert Spencer was one of the social Darwinists starting up. This is a new idea. British economist. He's an advocate of laissez-faire. And what the social Darwinists were doing were taking the origin of the species, the survival of the fittest, and basically applying it to the marketplace, saying the concentration of wealth is in the hands of the fit to benefit the human race. Saying if you are successful and wealthy, it's because you were meant to be so. An American social Darwinist was William Graham Sumner. He was all for the same ideas. Individuals must have absolute freedom to succeed or fail, and help for the poor was misguided, interfered with the laws of nature, preserved the unfit, therefore state intervention to reward society. Any of that is just useless and should not be adhered to. More on the new types of business, those that were starting up, some of the monopolies starting up. Pools were one of the early forms of favoritism shown in business. Railroads used these, and they kind of worked as one mega company. A pool of railroad companies would all agree to abide by the same policies, and railroads would offer large rebates to their frequent clients, free passes to the press, those that would benefit from them. To kind of combat this, they created the Interstate Commerce Act, which created the Interstate Commerce Commission to outlaw rebates in pools. Rates needed to be published. Trust is a very, very long explanation of a trust, but basically it's a form of a monopoly. A couple of different forms of trust. With John Rockefeller, you had horizontal integration, monopoly, where you basically take all your competitors, you own all of the that one entity. So if it is the processing or the sale of oil, then you own all the companies that do that. Vertical integration, you own from start to finish. You would own, if you could go with oil, you would own the oil wells to the refineries, the distribution centers, to the tankers, to the warehouses, the pipelines, all the way up. Basically eliminating competition and allowing yourself for greater profits. Standard Oil was founded by Rockefeller. He becomes one of the wealthiest, controlling 90 to 95% of oil in the United States. This idea, this monopoly, also encourages more. Gustavus Swift had the meatpacking industry. Carnegie had U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel was the first billion-dollar company. Borrowed, quote-unquote, borrowed the technology from England, like the Bessemer process. U.S. became the leading producer in the world. Profits up to 40 million in 1900. By 1890, they were producing 1 million tons a year, employed 20,000 workers, produced more steel than England. This is a good visual. Vertical integration, you would own all of the steps from start to finish, like the green bar, and then if you have a horizontal integration, you have all of this one process across. If you need more explanation, come see me about that one. JP Morgan, on the finance side of it, he was really well known for taking and consolidating bankrupt companies, especially the railroads, after the Panic of 1893, which forced about a fourth of the railroads into bankruptcy. He's going to stabilize their rates, reduce their debts. He used interlocking directorates, which is kind of like having the same employee for multiple companies. Again, quite successful. Assembly line, we're going to get into that as well, but a reorganization of working, much more efficient form of work. Speaking of efficiency, Frederick Taylor wrote the Principles of Scientific Management, which put the hands and responsibility of work and efficiency in the hands of the management, and made sure that work was as efficient as possible. Wall Street, handling money. I'm going to go through all the visuals quickly. Oh, Vanderbilt was another one making a lot of money on railroads. Consolidated the New York Central line, used steel rails, standardized gauges, Westinghouse air brakes, luxury passenger cars, used his millions from his steamboat business to merge into local railroads, kind of set standards for how to do business and how to do business on the luxury level. For those with money, gospel of wealth. Wealth was no longer bad, seen as a sign of God's approval. Kind of the Protestant ideas again. If you're successful, it means you have God's favor. It's your Christian duty to accumulate wealth. John D. Rockefeller said, "God gave me my riches." Andrew Carnegie takes a different aspect of it. His gospel of wealth idea was inequality is inevitable, but if you are wealthy, you should act as the trustees for the poor brethren. You have the God-given responsibility to carry on with philanthropic projects, giving to charities. He eventually will sell his company to JP Morgan for over $500 million and devoted his time to charity. Hundreds of millions in his lifetime given to charities, to libraries, universities, public institutions, all the above. This becomes a society of sellers. Marketing, like I said before, a lot of new money put into marketing, new chain stores, department stores, mail-in catalogs. America becomes a society of consumers and the wage earners, a lot more of the working class. A couple of cases to know about regulation. Munn versus Illinois. Supreme Court said the Illinois law put a ceiling on warehouse rates. And when a company violated it, it said only the Interstate Commerce Commission could regulate those prices. Kind of overturned with the Wabash case, said that only Congress, which was controlled the Interstate Commerce Commission, can control interstate trade. Anything within state borders was regulated by the state itself. Sherman antitrust law, first one to try to prohibit monopolies, not very successful because not very powerful. And the E.C. Knight kind of also allowing some monopolies to exist if they were managed in manufacturing. New wage earners, men were mostly immigrants, some women, textiles, food processing, children would work for lower wages. The unions, you have the Knights of Labor, American Federation of Labor. We did a lot with this. Knights of Labor, founded by Uriah Stevens, led by Terence Powderly. They would admit anybody. Decline after the Haymarket Square riot, where they were seen as anarchists. American Federation of Labor, much more successful. Samuel Gompers started as a craft union association, only admitted white skilled male laborers, and worked wages, better conditions, practical goals.